Good afternoon, everyone. With all the talk of market rigging across the planet happening, let's look into the newest USDA demand estimates. Animal product production, beef in 2020 exceeded 2019, as well as milk and poultry production. Wait a second, we just had the greatest economic collapse, food shortages, institutional buyers stopped buying, and 2020 exceeded a bumper year of 2019? Scratching my head on that one. Soybeans, millions of bushels here in the red, imports jumping from 14 million bushels to 35 million bushels in the U.S. And what about the ending stocks dropping from 909 million bushels to 140 million? Next year, that means we're going into a deficit. And speaking of silver, 1,000-year-old coin, and a way you might want to think about saving money, bulk grains in 50-pound bags from your local co-op, hard red winter wheat, rye, barley, sorghum. You're just going to need a grain grinder. The last time we had a Democrat-led Congress and president was during the first years of the Obama administration. Janet Yellen was the Fed chair then, and now soon to be the new Treasury Secretary under Biden. Obamacare was passed. President Obama and Congress sent billions to banks and Wall Street. That was the perfect recipe, and gold soared more than 200% from 2008 to 2011. Patriot Gold Group has the no-fee-for-life IRA, where your IRA or 401k can be in physical gold and silver, and you may be eligible for the no-fee-for-life IRA. So go ahead and give the folks at Patriot Gold Group a call to discuss physical gold and silver, and the knowledge that Patriot Gold Group is Consumer Affairs' top-rated gold IRA dealer 5 years in a row from 2016 until present. Click the link in the description box below for more information. And now on with the video. And if you haven't been camping out in the forest for the last couple of weeks, you know all about the market manipulation across the planet, the rigging, and we're not talking about ship rigging. We're talking about markets being moved by a bunch of players. So let's take a look at the USDA. Do you think they would do such a thing? Let's look at the numbers. This is off the World Agricultural Supply and Demand estimates for January 12th. You see the first month, the 6th month, and then the 12th, December. Obviously, those three are the key months to look for in these type of reports. So as we look for animal product production, this is for the United States. And we're looking at 2019, 2020, 21. And bringing you to the left column where it says beef, 2019, this is going to be in millions of pounds. 27 million pounds of production, 2019, and lo and behold, 2020 came out at 27 million pounds, even higher than 2019 for beef production. And jumping over to the red meat and poultry, 2019, a bumper year, super crazy amounts of economic activity, the world at the apex of travel and business, 105 million pounds. The economy collapses to the most since the Great Depression. Stores closed, farmers bankrupted, selling their herds, getting rid of it. They're too costly to keep the herds. And 2020 increased production to 106 million pounds. And here's the thing about milk. It's measured in billions of pounds, but I wish they would do it in liters or gallons so you could get a good gauge, but the number would probably be pretty big to fit on the chart here. But it reflects the very same. 2019, with all the economic prosperity, all the businesses open, all the convention centers open, all the schools open, institutional buyers, cafeterias all open, chugging in the milk as much as they could from all these farmers on co-op buy basis. 218 billion pounds. Yet 2020, after the economic collapse and farmers being bankrupted and pouring out hundreds of millions of gallons of milk, this shows here 222 billion pounds of milk, an increase from 2019 at the USDA. Now jumping over to the total grains here, these are going to be in millions of metric tons. Total for the U.S., 91 million metric tons, 2018-19, and that dropped to 66 million metric tons this year. That is a significant drop, and the reason that you're starting to see world food prices skyrocket and looking at most food staples at 7.5-year highs. So do the math on that. If it dropped that much after 2 years, where is it going to take us 2 years after and then another after that? Because these rosy forecasts that are coming out, like, oh, we're going to get bumper production, oh, we're going to do this. It's not being shown in the numbers, and I don't care if it's from Europe to Russia to Asia to United States, North America. These numbers are coming in low, really low. Now, of course, they're going to do the revised estimates not to spook the market, but wait until, just like they're doing now, they're going to wait till the end of the year. Who's manipulating markets? Let's jump over to the soybean supply, millions of metric tons. Ending stocks is where the real focus is, because the acreage planted and all that yield per acre, that's all estimates, but you really want to see what's been booked into the silos. And another thing I really disgusted by is that stranded acreage, meaning that the farmers couldn't get in and harvest it because the snowfalls came too early, left that in the fields, yet the USDA counted it as harvested and booked it into this ending stocks number. Now, that's why the revisions are coming. Because once the farmers actually get out there and are able to harvest last year's stranded crop, generally lose 25%. That's just the average. But if the fields are too wet or they can't get in, then it's a total loss. And then the USDA will then adjust after the planting has come in, because then they'll say, look, the planting's amazing this year. It's going to be a bumper harvest. Don't worry about the numbers from last year. We'll look forward to next year. That's exactly what happens with these ending stocks, and that's why these are the important numbers to look at. So 2018-19, United States, what's that, 24 million metric tons in the ending stocks? 2021 projections. Do I need my reading glasses? Does that say 4.76 million metric tons in the ending stocks? That's an 80% decline in 2 years. That would explain price rises again. Would you spook the populace and really tell them what's going on, that this is going to continue from this point forward and really get intense over next year through 2024 and 25? Now, this is going to switch up a little bit. This is going into millions of bushels for the United States as well. So it's not a misprint on the prior. It's shown in both charts here. And what's interesting, too, is the imports. 2018-19 were 14 million bushels imported into the U.S., which baffles me. Why would we need to import any soybean at all? Unless it's seed. But here we sit, far right column, 2020-21, projected imports 35 million bushels. That's doubled. That's a problem. And the ending stocks as well. This is in millions of bushels, not millions of tons. So it's a different way to measure it, but just measuring weight versus volume. The volume is in the bushel, obviously, but it can be calculated by weight, but it's a volume measurement. So we're going from 909 million bushels off the coyote cliff here to 140 million bushels, which means if this continues, next year we will have zero and be in a deficit. And you see the amount of buying that countries are doing across the planet to shore up their food supplies, which means we either stop selling internationally or the United States starts importing from other countries. But I don't know where the supply would come from, because the United States is one of the last on the planet to offer extra available supply. I encourage you to look what happened to Brazil, why Argentina suspended its wheat and corn exports, why Russia started a new futures exchange suddenly for wheat, why the European Union cannot even sell wheat and is down 70% on its exports for soft wheat. And there's a lot of things going on that seem like, wow, they're being manipulated. Now, good way for inflation hedge, not investment advice. Silver. Now, this is a 1,000-year-old silver coin. And what do you see? I see the same images of the masters of money on this 1,000 years ago that still control the markets today. In addition to the inflation hedge right there. Now, if you're sitting in your chair, please put on a seatbelt so you don't fall out after these next couple of slides. Most people don't make it to the very bottom addendum here inside the PDFs. Most people just look at the numbers and they're happy with that and they move on. This, I think, is the most important part of the report, and it should have been page 1 and 2. It's the reliability of the projections. So I want to widen that out here, and we know it's from the same report, so you can see a little bit better, and I put the red boxes there so you could see the variances of what's considered a glaring error that needs revision compared to the averages. So the root mean square error and the confidence intervals as well. The first two columns, the root mean square error, final estimates should be rounding right around 0.7. If it's above 1, it's considered an error. If it's above that standard deviation at 2, it's considered a glaring error that needs revision. So an error is considered at 1 that needs to be looked at. Complete revision at 2%. And when we come down into the confidence interval, see, they didn't put it at 99% confidence or 98%. They gave them a huge amount of swinging leeway at 90%. Even that difference should not exceed 1.1%. And again, when it reaches at 2%, it's a glaring statistical error that needs to be revised and needs to be looked at. So keep those in mind as we move through the charts. And I'm going to leave them both at 2, and I'll leave the base average at 0.7 for the root and 1.1 for the confidence interval. Now looking at the wheat ending stocks, the U.S. sits at 8.9. So a statistical glaring error is 1% and above. And whoever did the forecast for the U.S. wheat ending stocks is nearly 9. That means performance evaluation, whoever's putting these numbers together. And on the 90% confidence interval, remember, a glaring error and a revision occurs at 2%, and we are at 15% on that. 15. And all those other numbers, too, for the world ending stocks and the foreign, that is incredibly high. And then looking at the coarse grains as well. I'll just stay in the U.S. That root mean square error, again, it should be at 1, and it's at 15. And if we look over at the confidence level, it's at 25.7. Who's crunching these numbers, putting these reports out? And I'll bring you to the soybeans, too. This will really shake you to the core here. You look at the root mean square error. Remember, I'll even be generous and give it 2 on this case. But it should be at 0.7 to 1, and then it's a glaring error that needs looked. Soybeans, U.S. soybeans, 41.9. And a revision should occur at 2. That's 20x over when a revision needs to occur. That's how glaring the error is, and it still goes to print like this. How is this even possible that they couldn't revise the numbers above that I showed you before they put this in and put these statistical intervals in here that showed they made glaring, gargantuan, unacceptable, fraudulent mistakes? That's the only way to put it. You want to talk about rigged markets across the planet? Well, you're looking at one right here. You're looking at one to not scare the populace that we're going into a global food shortage. If it's a critical error at 2% that needs revision and it's sitting at 71% for U.S. soybean accounting, there's a huge problem here. Huge. And it goes like this through the rest of the report for every single category. I just chose these because, we mostly know about wheat and coarse grains and soy. And I love how they try to give themselves, an out on this too. The differences between forecasts and final estimates, it's all to protect the markets. This is another pull the curtains back and see what you really get here. Government actions across the planet should be a telling tale of what's happening and why people are protecting their food supplies internally. I am saying that all these distractions across the planet are to mask this. You eat every day, and without enough food, every society has collapsed through history. We're coming back into a very food insecure period of human civilization and society from now through 2030. And as I said in the introduction, a way for you to have a more stable, secure food supply for yourself is skipping the middlemen. Straight from the co-op in the 50-pound bags into your house and get a grinder, and that's all you need. Because what I found here across Pinterest, amazingly, were these old pioneering recipes. And I encourage you to go to Pinterest. There's an enormous amount. Just put pioneering recipe bread and cornbread. There's all kind of thing. And what they did, these are recipes from the late 1800s that could be cooked in an iron skillet, cast iron skillet, either in the oven or we can do it as we would do modern today. You can cook your own breads, but it requires very basic ingredients that you can mill at your house with a hand grinder or with an electric mill. Barley, hard red winter wheat, which you can make into flour, sorghum, which you can also make into flour, and rye, and you're getting into these old school kind of cooking breads. If you can get the corn, you can mill it yourself. You're looking for non-GMO varieties, and just have a quick conversation with anybody at the co-op and tell them you're interested in buying some 50-pound bags. You might have to order some. I know for sure there's a seed shortage going on right now in the United States. I've been to my local co-op looking for buckwheat and sorghum. And remember that the types of sorghum are not all the same, so you just can't go in and say, hey, I want sorghum. You want to get the type that bears grain in case you do want to plant some in your back, not just a type that'll be grown for silage that'll come up 3 feet tall and it'll just grow leaf and no heads on it. But go in and have a real conversation with your co-op, and you tell them, I'm interested in learning about what kind of grains I could sprout out into microgreens, which kinds I can grow on a quarter acre for my grain production, and then types that I can also mill to make flours for myself for cooking in breads and pastries, etc. Knowledge is at these areas that supply farmers, and that's where you're going to want to go. And think about the 50-pound bag, and you say, well, 50 pounds, it sounds so expensive. Well, right now, a 50-pound bag of hard red winter wheat was $16. 50 pounds. And if you like sorghum and some of these more ancient grains, sorghum right now is about $50 for a 50-pound bag, which is $1 a pound. I don't even know if you could find sorghum in a bulk store, and I doubt you could get it for $1 a pound. You can order buckwheat. I mean, you can't find buckwheat in any store almost, but you can make noodles out of that. You can cook with it. You can grind it. There's an enormous amount of things you can do with bulk grains. And think about that. For a couple $100 in your kitchen, you could have from floor to ceiling stacked with bulk grain. So think about $16 for a 50-pound bag of hard red winter wheat, non-GMO. For $200, you could get 18 bags. And that's a lot of bread. Plus you could trade, plus you could sprout, and that's great for growing for chickens and whatnot. You could sprout that out into a root base with the grass. Chickens love it, goats love it, pigs love it. And as we move through the breakdown of illusion here, you are going to have to be getting more self-sufficient. Now that's one way to do it, going to your local co-op and looking on the shelves there and buying grain in bulk. But if you don't have that and you don't have the grinder and you don't want to go to the trouble of grinding your own grain, you could get storable foods. And the same thing, you can keep them in your home in case of an emergency or you can't get to the store. And heaven forbid the supermarkets close like they did in the beginning of 2020. Or you have to stand outside. It's really cold right now. How long do you want to stand outside of a store? My Patriot Supply and Adapt 2030, the 2-week or the 4-week emergency food supply. And keep in mind, they also have other longer food supply kits as well, 1 month, 6 months. You can take a look in there. It's a great way to support the channel. That link's in the description box below, as well as the link to the PDF that I highly encourage everybody to look through with a fine-tooth comb on the USDA report and what kind of unusual numbers you can find. I do thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.